viciously attacked in her own home.
What I saw was just absolutely horrific. I mean, this child went through hell.
Who would have a reason to want to kill this girl?
Police are desperate to find the killer before he strikes again.
It's panic.
There is somebody capable of doing what they did to Missy out there, and we don't have it.
But a dark trail of evidence.
He actually wound up weeping kind of in a fetal position.
This is bizarre. This is strange.
Leads them to a suspect
This was someone hiding in plain sight.
they could have never imagined.
No one would have known that, not anybody.
The city of Arlington is the home of 2 professional sports teams and a major amusement park.
There's something for everybody. And if you can't find something to do, then you've got a problem.
But in early April 1994, this idyllic community was rocked to its core.
911.
And it started when police received a 911 call from the Holly Park apartment complex.
911, 325.
Woke up 3:30 in the morning, smelling smoke. I walk into my living room. There's so much smoke that I can't see. It's panic. There's a fire. We need to get out.
Residents quickly evacuate the building as firefighters arrive to battle the blaze.
You're totally helpless. You just sit there and watch everything go up in flames.
Still think about it. Just how close I came to dying.
Firefighters track the fire to its source, an apartment on the 2nd floor. Once inside, they make a horrific discovery.
Firefighters discovered a body in the bedroom. This was not just someone falling asleep in bed smoking. This was something more.
Homicide investigators are quickly summoned and try to make sense of the devastating scene.
I was informed of what the fire department had found and what they reported. We had a body inside of a burning home. Detective Stanton and I make entry into the apartment. The fire is out, but there's still a lot of damage.
Virtually everything has got like a coating of this black, nasty soot.
Fire marshals could actually smell the gasoline and were able to see pour patterns. This was an intentionally set fire.
The trail of destruction leads all the way to the bed.
What I saw was just absolutely horrific. I've seen bad crime scenes, and I've seen crime scenes involving people that were burnt in fires. This was elevated. A young lady who you could see, even with the smoke damage and the burn damage, you could still see that this was a victim of a very brutal sexual assault. The body was laying on her back on the bed. The positioning is consistent with sexual assault. She had trauma to her face, as though she had been physically assaulted. Clearly, there was a puncture mark in the middle of her chest. This child went through hell.
It was like nothing I've ever seen. You know, who would do something as horrible as this?
A lot of evidence was destroyed simply because of the fire damage. But we found what we believe might have been the murder weapon. There was a knife in the sink.
But fire damage to the knife has robbed investigators of the forensic evidence needed to link it to the killer.
Had that fire not been set, we probably would have latent prints. No telling what we would have had.
Investigators collect the knife for testing and manage to salvage some papers that survived the inferno. For detectives, the most important goal is to identify their victim.
We found out that that apartment was, in fact, leased and occupied by one occupant, identified as Missy Gruball, 19-year-old college student from Burleson.
I can remember standing on the lawn, and I said, "There's Missy's car, but she's not out here with us. She was not accounted for."
So we had a general idea who our victim was, but that was not confirmed.
This body was so distorted that they had to use a forensic odontologist to confirm Missy as the victim.
Once we've identified the victim as Missy Gruball, we talked to her family in Burleson, and it's gut-wrenching. Missy's mother was devastated.
I had a daughter myself. That sort of hits home.
As investigators meet with Missy's family, word of her death spreads through the small community.
When I heard the news, my heart just dropped. Missy was so innocent and so pure and such an honest soul. She was so much fun, very friendly, nurturing. She would have given anything to help anybody. She was literally the most genuine person I've ever known. We were very active in church, she and I both were. Missy was very strong in her faith, very moral. She was always the person to do the right thing, always.
In high school, her strength went beyond her faith.
Missy was very focused. She was a very hard worker. That's how she was so successful in school. She was in the high school band. She played the French horn, and she was amazing at it.
Even as a teenager, Missy had a clear vision of what she wanted and the drive to get it.
She wanted to go to the University of Texas at Arlington, and she wanted to get her own apartment. But she didn't want to burden her mother financially. So Missy was working to support herself to afford to be able to go to school.
But even though she wanted to stand on her own, Missy's heart stayed close to home.
She probably spoke with her mom every day on the phone. Missy and her mother were very close. They were a team in life and treasured each other.
You cannot describe the pain that Missy's mother went through. But I'll let her know, I really need you. You're going to help me find who did this to Missy, because she knew her daughter better than probably anybody.
Missy's mother tells detectives what she knows of Missy's activities on the last night of her life.
Well, Missy worked these late hours as a food server. She would always let her mother know that I'm home, I'm safe. On the night of Missy's murder, she'd call her mother late at night when she got home.
She finished her phone call with her mom and then dispatch getting a phone call that the apartment's on fire, establishing kind of a window as to when the actual murder would have occurred.
Police determined that Missy had been killed sometime between midnight and 3:30 a.m. It's not much for detectives to go on, but when they arrive back in Arlington, they have an unexpected lead waiting.
Once the victim's name had been released, one of our officers came forward and said, I took a report listing your victim.
A week prior to the death, Missy Gruball filed a police report on a guy that's staying with Missy who stole from her. And I'm thinking that very well could be our killer. We need to find this person. We need to talk to him. We need to get him in here as soon as possible.
Coming up, detectives track a dangerous suspect
This individual made threats against her.
and soon uncover a lead they never expected.
It caught my attention immediately. Something is very suspicious here.
That puts them face to face with Missy's attacker.
I said, "You killed Missy Grubaugh. Let's start talking about this."
Arlington police detectives are searching for the killer of Texas college student Missy Grubaugh. They've learned that the 19-year-old co-ed filed a police report a week before her death.
Missy had reported a coworker took her tip jars, over $1,000 worth of tips.
Missy took the semester off in order to save more money, so all of her tip money was being hoarded so she could go back next semester to college.
The police report describes how Missy named a Charles Johnson as the potential thief, and that he had been staying with her before her money disappeared. Detectives speak to Missy's friends to find out more about Charles and his relationship to Missy.
Charles was a coworker and apparently was someone that she thought was a friend of hers.
She socialized with coworkers, typically after work.
Young people she worked with, that's her crowd. Charles Johnson at that time, we are told, was homeless. And so Missy, being the very generous individual that she is, allows him to come stay with her. In fact, she even gave him a key to her apartment.
Missy was very kind-hearted, and I think that it was very easy for some people to take advantage of kind-hearted people.
Talking with her friends, there was a common theme about Missy. She was not only incredibly sweet, but incredibly naive. Too pure to see the bad in people. As an investigator, and that scares me because I see someone who is easily victimized.
Only days after Charles moved in, Missy discovers she has been played.
Missy finds out one day that about $1,000 is gone from her tip jar. Well, the only person that could have done that was Charles Johnson.
Enraged, Missy confronts Charles about the theft and kicks him out of her home.
Something else that was very important from everything that I learned about Missy was she will also stand up for what's right. So Missy immediately calls the police.
Missy filed a police report, and a theft charge warrant was issued for Charles's arrest.
Here's some motive right here. This is retaliation for getting me in trouble. And so he's immediately on our radar. We want to see this guy. We want to talk to him. Problem is, we didn't know where he was at. It's hard to find somebody who is basically homeless, and we had detectives that were assigned to find him.
While police search for Johnson, Missy's autopsy report comes in. It confirms investigators' belief that the fire is not what killed her.
The autopsy findings demonstrated she was dead before the fire started. She should have inhaled some smoke. We should have seen some soot. We should have seen some carbon monoxide in her blood. That's not the case here at all. She had a bruise of her left eye and an injury on the brow ridge that would be consistent with being struck by a fist or another object. Injuries directed that show that the assailant wanted to feel in control and dominant. A fatal stab wound to the chest was the actual cause of death, but it went completely through her heart and damaged her left lung, and there was a massive internal bleeding.
The autopsy also confirms detectives' worst suspicions. The attack was sexual in nature.
She had been forcibly penetrated. This was a rape homicide by a very aggressive perpetrator.
Though the fire destroyed physical evidence at the scene, the medical examiner immediately notifies detectives of a major discovery.
We did a search of the body for any remnant evidence that wasn't destroyed by the fire. Semen was recovered that could be analyzed for DNA.
Forensic evidence and physical evidence is great. You've got to have it. It leads you to your killer. So that semen was a forensic link to the suspect.
The semen is sent for DNA analysis, hoping it will point to the killer. But detectives make a calculated decision not to make the information public.
The fact that she was sexually assaulted was not public, it was not released. And the reason for that is because it's what we call guilt knowledge evidence. And it's knowledge that is only known by the person who did the crime. You never reveal that because that can lead you to that suspect and to identify him. That's very powerful evidence.
Other evidence is piling up too. Among the documents collected from Missy's apartment, detectives discover a treasure trove of personal letters.
These were letters from someone named Ivan Villa. The nature of the letters indicated some type of relationship between this individual and Missy Grubaugh. We don't know if it was romantic or not, but some type of close personal relationship. So that's important. We needed to find out who this individual was.
Detectives do a background check on Ivan, and they're alarmed by what they uncover.
Ivan was a registered sex offender. And that just set the hairs on the back of my neck up.
Yeah, this is the sort of individual that we're looking for. Let's go find Ivan right away.
Detectives investigating the rape and murder of Missy Grubaugh have found letters in the victim's apartment that reveal she was having a relationship with Ivan Villa, a young man with a dark past.
He was, in fact, flagged as a sex offender. And so he's immediately on our radar because we know that Missy was sexually assaulted.
Detectives examine the letters between Missy and Ivan and discover that they had a tumultuous relationship.
The context of those letters looked like a conflict of two young adults trying to make something work in a relationship that is filled with confusion.
The conflict centered around how far Missy would allow the relationship to go physically.
Missy was very moral. It was an admirable thing in our faith to remain pure until we were married. It's something that Missy took very seriously.
The letters suggest that Ivan and Missy may have come too close to crossing the line.
Apparently, there might have been times where they went a little further than Missy was comfortable with. You could tell that she was upset about that.
Missy's friends knew that she was not one to back down under pressure.
If she felt like she was being taken advantage of, then she would stand up for herself, and I admired that about her so much.
Bottom line is, we need to bring Ivan in. We need to talk to him because he was, in fact, in some level of a relationship with Missy at the time of her death.
2 days after Missy's murder, detectives bring Ivan in for an interview. He claims that he and Missy were working through their issues in a kind and loving way.
Ivan told me that he cared for Missy, and he wanted a relationship with her. He certainly did want to have that relationship go a step further, but Missy was convicted to her beliefs and to her faith. They were also battling with the fact that he had this crime over his head.
Ivan tells detectives he was home alone asleep the night Missy was murdered.
That's not an acceptable alibi for myself or Detective Stanton.
But was it really possible this young man could have committed such a horrible crime?
When you start talking about the personality of who you're looking for, you gotta be careful. If you start picturing this person as this evil predator, you may miss the actual killer. That's why you have to follow the evidence. The fact that we had semen from the crime scene means we have forensic evidence that would either connect him or exclude him.
Detectives ask Ivan to provide DNA samples. But until those test results are revealed, detectives do not have grounds to hold Ivan in custody.
In 1994, those tests usually took anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks.
While waiting for results on DNA tests for Ivan and searching for Missy's former coworker, Charles Johnson, detectives continue their investigation by canvassing Missy's friends at the restaurant and learn something that adds another suspect to the list. Although this time, this suspect could be at the very top.
The name Jeffrey Smith came up. Her work associates told us that Jeffrey Smith was an employee there who Missy reported and got him in trouble at work. What we were being told is that really upset him and angered him.
Restaurant staff tell the detectives that Jeffrey had threatened to kill Missy during an outburst, and he was fired a few weeks later after getting into a fight with a manager.
What we are being told is this individual was hot-tempered, and he had made threats against her. So we're putting all of this together and thinking, yeah, we really need to talk to this guy.
But who could imagine a coworker committing such a horrendous crime? Detectives speak with another employee at the restaurant who knows Jeffrey well.
His girlfriend, Kristen, agreed to come in to speak with Detective Stan and I.
Visibly nervous, Kristen paints a troubling picture of her boyfriend.
Kristen told us that they were living together, but she also shared that she was concerned with his personality. He was very volatile. She was afraid of him, and she did not feel safe being there with him. She was going to move out and move back with her parents in Denton.
But it wasn't just fear for what Jeffrey might do that was causing Kristen to leave him. It was a fear of what he'd already done.
What Kristen wanted us to know, and she was very open about it, was she actually suspected that Jeff was involved in the murder of Missy.
Detectives investigating the murder of 19-year-old Missy Grubaugh are interviewing Kristen Waller, a young woman who believes her boyfriend, Jeffrey Smith, could be the killer.
She just basically said, this is what my belief is. So I asked why. How did she formulate that? Kristen told us the night of Missy's murder, Jeff did not come to the apartment, and he didn't come back all night. So she didn't know where he was at. She also knew the conflict between her and him. So she's putting all this together, and she actually believed that Jeff was with Missy on that night and that he committed this crime.
Kristen gives detectives the phone number for where Jeff is staying. A background check shows the 22-year-old has no criminal history, but detectives are still suspicious.
We know that he had made some threats against Missy, and his whereabouts are unknown on the night of her death, so we needed to talk to him. I called Jeff Smith after speaking with Kristen, and he actually was cooperative and agreed to come to the police department.
In the interview room, detectives are struck by Jeff's demeanor.
Jeff Smith was smiling and nonchalant, just really not taking the entire situation that serious. I asked him, what was your relationship like with Missy Grubaugh? His story was she was infatuated with him. And as a matter of fact, her infatuation is what created the problems and the conflict between him and Kristen. Kristen's telling us, no, I'm moving out because the guy scares me to death.
Jeff also has a conflicting account of his alibi.
He gave us this excuse that he was with Kristen. We already had information that he was not.
When detectives suggest Jeff is lying to them about his alibi, he laughs them off.
I've seen this type of personality before. He's narcissistic, he's cocky, he's arrogant. And I certainly wasn't going to take anything that he said at face value.
Despite their concerns about Jeff, detectives have no evidence to connect him to Missy's murder and are forced to let him go. But before he leaves, they ask him for a DNA sample. And to their surprise, he agrees.
He did give us the samples that we needed for forensic analysis that would certainly connect or exclude him from the murder.
Then, 4 days after Missy's murder, Detective Lenore gets a frantic call from Kristen about Jeffrey Smith.
He had abducted Kristen earlier in the morning, physically abducted her and drove off with her from her parents' home in Denton.
Kristen tells Detective Lenore that Jeff was distraught and held her in an apartment for 8 hours, threatening to kill her if she tried to leave.
Kristen's telling us the motive was that Jeff just didn't want her to leave him. He released her safely a little later that day, but now she didn't know where he was at. She was definitely afraid of him. She contacted the Denton Police Department and ended up getting a warrant for his arrest for kidnapping. He became a fugitive. You've got this guy who is a loose cannon, and there was a level of urgency to find him. We put out a national broadcast along with that warrant that he is also a suspect in a murder investigation.
With Kristen safely at her parents' house and police in several states searching for Jeff, detectives in Arlington find their murder investigation in a holding pattern.
As far as Jeff Smith, we do have his hair, his blood, and his saliva for DNA that would certainly connect or exclude him from the murder.
DNA testing is still underway. But days later, investigators do get an important update from the lab.
They were able to type the blood from the semen, and they knew they were looking for someone with a certain type of blood.
Jeff did not match the blood type from the semen.
In addition to Jeffrey Smith, Ivan Villa is also ruled out because of his blood type, leaving Charles Johnson as the only active suspect for Missy's murder. And Charles is still at large.
That is incredibly frustrating because there is somebody capable of doing what they did to Missy out there, and we don't have it.
As the weeks pass with the case unsolved, Missy's family and friends grow more and more concerned.
It was very disheartening for a lot of us. We just watched the news and would hang on to anything that they would mention about it. It made all of us wonder why it happened to Missy. It was just devastating.
Then, a month into the investigation, detectives get a tip from an unexpected source.
I got a call out of the blue from Miss Grubauer. She wanted to let me know that she recalled a conversation that she had with Missy. It was so incredibly bizarre. And I just thought something is very suspicious here.
Detectives hunting the killer of college student Missy Grubauer have just received a lead that has turned up the heat on a case going cold. The victim's mother recalls a detail from the days just before Missy's death.
Missy's mom is providing information about how Missy had talked about this guy, Luis.
He was a 32-year-old man who had come over to the apartment, and the main thing that Mrs. Grubauer remembers is that he talked to her all night long till in the early morning hours, but then they got involved in a pillow fight.
At the time, Mrs. Grubauer thought little of the playful incident, but she suggests maybe Luis could help the investigation with information about Missy. Detectives have a different view.
This is bizarre. This is strange. The 32-year-old man had a pillow fight with her. It caught my attention immediately.
Investigators ask how Missy knew Luis.
Luis worked with Missy, and he lived at the Holly Park Apartments. She had done some babysitting for Luis's baby at the apartment complex.
Detectives' first stop? the restaurant where Missy and Luis both worked. Luis isn't there, but the manager tells them Luis is a model employee.
He was an Army veteran. I learned that about him. No criminal history. Matter of fact, management gave him an award for a heroic act. He actually stopped a robbery.
The detectives ask workers what they knew about Luis's relationship with Missy.
Co-workers described Luis as a friend. Sometimes after work, they might enjoy a beer together.
Detectives also hear something that catches them off guard.
A work associate relayed to us that Luis made the comment, and these were his words, is, "I hope they catch that son of a bitch that killed and raped Missy." The fact that she was sexually assaulted, no one should have known that. That was never released. He might have just been speculating, but the fact that it was said really, really alarmed me.
Investigators have uncovered yet another suspicious coworker in Missy's life, one that she saw every day. Detectives asked the manager for Luis's phone number.
Told him I was investigating the death of Missy Grubal and that his name had surfaced from her babysitting his son, and Luis agreed to come see me. He was relaxed, he was polite, pleasant, regular, clean-cut guy. He told us that Missy used to babysit his son and that they worked together. So I told Luis what I want to do is exclude all of the known males to Missy so that I could find the guilty party. And the process in which I do that is I take samples, blood, hair, and saliva, compare it to the DNA, and exclude them.
The request instantly changes Luis's mood.
His response immediately was, what are you talking about? Wasn't the evidence all burnt up? And I said, no, it wasn't. I've got significant incriminating evidence that was specifically left there by the suspect. Now his demeanor is changing, and you can see the concern in his face. I kind of even broke my own rule a little bit here, because a lot of times I don't like to give guilt knowledge information, but the fact that I knew that he had already said something about Missy being sexually assaulted, I went ahead and revealed to him whoever killed Missy sexually assaulted her, and I've got their semen. And Luis immediately says, you know, I've got to go. I have to leave. And I have no legal right to keep him, regardless of what I believe. I just simply asked, Luis, are you going to give me your sample? He says, I got to get out of here. I got to leave. We'll do it Monday.
Monday comes and goes with no sign of Luis, but detectives don't let up.
I call him. He calls me back Tuesday. We make arrangements for Wednesday. Come Wednesday, he doesn't show up again.
Detective Lenore calls Luis at work, but gets some alarming news.
Management had informed us that the woman that he was living with at the time, his common-law wife, had called and said that he had to leave town. I called her. I said, I hear Luis is gone. You and I need to talk.
Jeanette has been living with Luis for 2 years. The couple moved into the Holly Park Apartments 6 months earlier.
They had been together long enough for them to have a child together. She was also pregnant with another child. But what's interesting is on the Monday that Luis was going to meet with me, which was about 3 days earlier, they got married. They got legally married. Well, in Texas, a wife cannot testify against her husband. I mean, those are my thoughts that are going on. I kind of kept that to myself and said, okay, that's interesting.
Jeanette knew Missy as a sweet girl who used to babysit her son and had been shocked to hear about her murder.
And so I asked if she recalls what occurred on the night of Missy's murder. She said Luis had gotten off work about 10:30 or 11 and informed her that he was going to have some drinks with some friends. Then he came in close to midnight, and then she heard him leave.
2 hours later, Jeanette hears Luis return.
She hears him come into the apartment and takes a shower and then leaves again. And then she hears him come back again. She notices that he's coughing and he smells of smoke. His story to her is that he was out jogging and he noticed that there was an apartment on fire. And so he went in there and that he saw this individual on a bed, and he said it was Missy. And he tried to do mouth to mouth, he said, but he couldn't do it. And he was overcome by smoke and that he had to leave, and he came back. That's it, end of story. They just go to bed. Nobody calls 911. Nobody does anything. They go to sleep. I mean, the story is so bizarre, but she didn't question him. And I don't think she ever really saw it for what it was until she actually sits down and starts telling me. And as she's telling me, reality is setting in as far as what Louise might have done. She's pretty much stunned. I said, I need to go into your apartment. I need to get a search warrant.
Investigators descend on Louise and Jeanette's apartment, just a few buildings over from where Missy was killed.
One of the things that I wanted was his dog tags. Because he was in the Army, I wanted to know what his blood type was. And I wanted to know if the blood type from his dog tags matched the blood type from the semen.
The blood type matches that of Missy's attacker. It's the link detectives have been looking for, and enough to bring Louise in. But first, they'll need to find him.
So I got an arrest warrant for Louise. The next day, I get a teletype that the vehicle that Louise was in was found abandoned and burned in San Antonio.
Detectives believe they have finally uncovered the man who murdered Missy Grubaugh and set fire to her apartment. But Luis Arroyo has fled Arlington. His car found abandoned and set ablaze in San Antonio.
We don't know, but suspected there was evidence there, but the car was pretty much gone. I mean, it was burned up.
There's an urgency. We need to find this person as soon as possible.
Detective Lenore suspects Luis's wife, Jeanette, knows where he's hiding.
I told her that we realize you had nothing to do with this crime, but you can be a party by covering and by lying. So I said, you realize that when she was murdered, she was sexually assaulted. And when she heard that, you could see it upset her. It angered her.
Confronted with the full horror of what was done to Missy, Jeanette gives up Luis.
Jeanette gave me the address where he was staying in San Antonio. San Antonio Police Department went into the home and arrested Luis without incident.
Detectives Lenore and Stanton traveled to San Antonio to confront Luis Arroyo in person.
It is the most unique interrogation I've ever seen. I mean, Louise really had like a mental regression, and he actually wound up in a ball on the floor, weeping and kind of in a fetal position.
I don't know what he was doing. I just thought he wanted us to have some type of empathy for him.
When Luis finally tells his side of the story, it doesn't add up for detectives.
He did not admit to sexually assaulting Missy Grubaugh. He did admit, yes, I did have sexual intercourse with her. He said, we had consensual sex. I knew it was her first time, and I wanted it to be a very gentle and pleasant experience for her. That just sickened me. What happened to that young lady was anything but gentle and loving. It was brutal.
Faced with Luis's denial, Detective Lenore changes tactics.
I said, you killed Missy Grubaugh. All right, let's start talking about this. And he said, you know, I don't remember. I remember getting a knife. I think I did stab her.
Detectives are stunned. Is this the confession they've been waiting for?
I'm not going to call it a confession because my definition of a confession is someone who says, this is what I did and I did everything that you have evidence that they committed. Luis gave a statement with several admissions that included guilt knowledge information. Luis did not admit to setting the fire, but he recalls that there was a fire set. He gave us all of this incriminating information that clearly said it was him.
They have enough to charge Luis. But detectives want to make the case against him airtight.
Detective Stanton and I got an evidential search warrant and collected his blood and his hair and saliva sample. He was, in fact, matched to the DNA from the sexual assault kit.
With Luis's statements, detectives can put together exactly what happened on the night Missy was murdered.
I believe he went there thinking he could convince her to have intercourse with him. His primary focus was to have sex with that young lady. Maybe initially he thought would be consensual, which it would never happen. So now he's mad at her, and then he took it to another level, physically abused her, sexually assaulted her, and then he killed her. After he killed Missy, he needed to destroy evidence, and that's when he made his decision to set fire to the apartment.
Lewis was charged with capital murder. Once we had the written statement, we had the statements from the wife. Pretty straightforward case.
As Luis awaits trial, detectives zero in on two former suspects in the case.
Charles Johnson was finally tracked down, and he was not even in the area at the time of the murder.
Jeffrey Smith was arrested and convicted of kidnapping his girlfriend, Kristen. He received a 4-year sentence. Luis Arroyo's trial lasts only 5 days.
We got a conviction rather quickly. And in Texas, once a person is convicted of capital murder with the death penalty waived, it's an automatic life sentence.
Although detectives have found their killer, the win is bittersweet.
He being in prison will never take away the pain, the horrific torture that child was put through. And him being in prison will never heal the wounds that the family has. They never recover. You can't bring Missy back. You just do what you got to do and make sure people pay for the crimes they commit.
Missy's mother is in a state of permanent grief. Missy's death did leave a very large void. Missy's life was taken way too soon, but it was a beautiful life. She was a beautiful soul, and she still is.
For more information on an unexpected killer, go to oxygen.com. A devoted couple building the perfect family.
They were both very committed to adopting children that had a difficult past.
Everybody in the family loved her.
Murdered in a night of unspeakable horror.
She saw a man with what appeared to be an axe.
Her skull was split with a maul.
Who could have wanted Bob and Kay Swartz dead?
This person had threatened to kill them.
We couldn't rule out anyone. We just didn't know.
And what detectives uncover has everyone blindsided.
I didn't have a single suspicion. I would have never thought.
The relatives were in disbelief.
The expected killer hadn't done it. The unexpected killer had done it.
Nobody in a million years would have expected them to commit one of the most heinous crimes in the history of Annapolis.
On a cold winter morning in 1984,
Colorado County Police.
Police in Cape St. Clair, Maryland, receive an eerie call.
Okay, what is the problem, sir? My parents are dead. You think your parents are dead? Yeah.
First responders race to the scene and make a horrific discovery.
When I arrived, there were uniformed officers that were protecting the crime scene who told me we had a 17-year-old and a 9-year-old who just learned that their parents, Bob and Kay Schwartz, were killed.
The children are visibly shaken and in shock, but agree to answer a few questions.
My partner and I met with a young man by the name of Larry Schwartz and his sister Annie. Both of them were very calm. This young man, he said that he had gotten up that morning and that Annie, who was 9, told them that she didn't know where their parents were. He then looked out the dining room window and saw his mother's body in the backyard. He told me he immediately shielded Annie's eyes so Annie wouldn't see her body and called the police.
Detective Barr leaves the kids in the care of the attending officers and moves to the backyard. It's his first grim look at the scene of the crime.
Kay Schwartz was found outside. She was a few feet from the sliding glass door in the snow. She only had one sock on her right foot. Her left foot was bare.
The blood in the snow was horrific. It was just horrific.
The blood had created a slush in the snow. Kay Schwartz had puncture wounds around her neck, and she had a massive wound to the top of her skull.
Detective Barr then heads inside.
I looked in the basement area, and I found a black vinyl chair that had pooled blood beside it. It appeared as though she had been attacked sitting in that chair, and she bled heavily onto the floor. And there was blood from that chair leading out back.
Just when it seems the crime scene can't get any more grisly, detectives discover another ravaged body.
We found a small office adjacent to the landing of the stairs. The door was closed. We opened the door, looked inside, and found Bob Schwartz's body. There was an inordinate number of stab wounds to Bob Schwartz. There were defensive wounds in the body. We theorized at that point it was very possible that Kay was attacked first, and then Bob heard the noise and started to come out of the room, giving Kay the opportunity to flee out the back door as the killer or killers went after Bob.
As detectives make their way through the rest of the house, they see no signs of forced entry. Did Bob and Kay know their attacker? Or did an intruder sneak in through an unlocked door?
As I viewed this crime scene, the enormity was off the chart. There was blood found everywhere. It was extraordinarily gruesome.
Investigators collect blood evidence, but there's no sign of a knife or any kind of murder weapon. Then, toward the back of the house, they spot a critical clue.
We found a bloody palm print on the sliding glass door near Kay's body. We wanted to figure out who it actually belonged to. Bob obviously never left the computer room. He died where he was attacked. And Kay's body was outside, and neither one of her hands had blood on the palms. That palm print probably belonged to the killer.
While concerned neighbors whisk Larry and Annie away, detectives get a chance to talk to some of Bob and Kay's grieving friends who have gathered at the house.
When I found out that Bob and Kay had been murdered, I said, "What? You're numb. You don't know what happened." And I just couldn't believe that Bob and Kay were gone.
Bob and Kay Schwartz met at the University of Maryland outside Washington, D.C. They were both getting their master's degree in education. They both wanted to be teachers. He was 35, she was 27. She fell in love with him, and maybe 18 months later, they married.
They were very involved in all kinds of church activities. Kay and Bob were intimately involved. Everybody seemed to know them. Everybody felt a connection with them.
Bob was an engineer of sorts, worked at NASA Goddard down in Greenbelt, Maryland, in the space program on some level.
Bob had to be a pretty clever man because he was involved in computers back in the dark ages, 1984.
He was always very positive. He was funny, quick sense of humor.
Kay was the fun-loving, carefree spirit, beloved by everyone who knew her. Always wanted to be a teacher, became a teacher. They wanted children, but Kay was unable to have children.
Far from breaking their spirit, Bob and Kay's disappointment only seemed to strengthen their bond and gave them a loving sense of purpose.
They decided they wanted to open their house and their hearts.
In 1973, Bob and Kay embarked on their dream.
That became part of their mission in life, in adopting children that had a difficult past, to provide some substance and some guidance.
Larry Swartz was 6 years old when the Swartzes adopted him. 6 years later, they adopted a 4-year-old girl, Anne.
Annie was born in Korea, did not speak much English when she first arrived. Annie and Larry were happy to be part of that family.
Kay and Bob wanted to be the best parents ever to those children.
Now, Larry and Annie were orphans again, and detectives need to find out who committed such a heinous crime and why. Police begin by talking to neighbors, hoping to find a witness who might lead them to the killer.
We were alerted by a person approximately a block away on a parallel street that he had found what appeared to be a blood trail leading into the woods at the end of that street. And as we followed that trail, we found what appeared to be a barefoot footprint and a socked footprint.
Were these Kay's footprints? If so, how did they end up in the woods when her body was found in the backyard?
We also found a pair of footprints made by shoes. Footprints suggesting a chase through the neighborhood.
The trail of footprints ran for quite a distance through the woods and the neighborhood.
The footprints seemed to suggest that after stabbing Bob to death, the murderer went after Kay one last time.
In my opinion, it appeared as though Kay Schwartz was fleeing from her killer, and at some point, a person caught up with her and then walked her to the back of the home where she was killed.
At the end of the trail, detectives make one more pivotal discovery.
Searching through the woods, my sergeant found what appeared to be a murder weapon. It was a wood-splitting maul. There appeared to be blood on the maul, along with hair. But the handle appeared to have been wiped clean. There wasn't any blood on the handle at all.
Detectives send the maul to the lab, but find no trace of a knife anywhere. It's a puzzling scene that offers them few clues.
It was a very difficult crime scene to try to put together in your mind what may have happened or how did this occur. At this point, we only had 2 children, Larry and Annie, who could provide any information.
When detectives circle back to them at the neighbor's house, they do their best to help.
Annie related to us that she had awakened in the middle of the night to her father's screams of "help me, help me." She continued to tell us that she went to investigate and she walked to the door that exited to the carport. At that point, she saw a man walking away with what appeared to be an axe over his shoulder. And she described the person as very tall, with curly hair, and asked, "Was that person as tall as me?" She said, "No, he was taller."
Detectives speak to Larry next, but suddenly the 17-year-old seems nervous. Does he know something about the man Annie saw in the yard?
When we pressed Larry, he said that Michael was 6'4".
Detectives stop cold. Who is Michael?
And very quickly, I established that Michael Schwartz was a brother of Larry.
As it turned out, Bob and Kay Schwartz had adopted 3 children.
Michael, who was also 17, no longer lived with them, but it wasn't clear why. So at that point, we were very, very eager to talk to Michael.
Coming up, investigators uncover bad blood and dark secrets.
They send him to a state mental hospital.
Detectives uncover startling clues.
Nobody expected anything like this to happen.
It became almost unbelievable.
Was there more than one person with a score to settle?
This person said, I could stick a knife in his back.
We didn't know what we were dealing with.
When they appear to have no suspects in the homicides of Bob and Kay Swartz, police learn the couple's adopted children have an estranged brother.
Both Annie and Larry related to us that Michael no longer lived with them, but had been getting into a lot of trouble.
Detectives are anxious to know more. Could Michael have possibly wanted to harm Bob and Kay?
As we spoke to relatives during the investigation, Michael was quickly identified by them as someone we should look at very closely.
Michael had made threats internally in the house.
Detectives interview the Swartz's friends and family to get more insight into Michael's history. Larry was the Swartz's first adopted child. But long before Annie, Bob and Kay provided Larry with a brother.
Michael was 8 years old when the Swartzes adopted him. The boys were only 6 months apart in age.
The Swartz's second adopted child had arrived at their home, a troubled boy.
As they interviewed everybody, detectives found that Michael's mother abandoned him when he was an infant, and Michael was relinquished to the custody of the state and became a foster child. He went through a series of 6 foster homes before the Swartzes adopted him.
Bob and Kay were determined to turn Michael's life around, but the boy's difficult past wasn't easy to shake, and the problem started almost immediately.
Michael was so antisocial in his approach to life. Michael was having behavioral issues at home, not obeying his parents on a consistent basis, smarting back, profanity.
As the boys grew older, Michael continued to struggle. But that didn't stop Bob and Kay from having high hopes for both their children.
I think Bob and Kay expected Larry and Michael to apply themselves very diligently to their studies and to do well. I think that Larry had a desire to please people. He had kind of a soft-spoken shyness to him. He seemed to want to engage with people. But I think Michael was a challenge from the get-go. I think Michael, he had some deviancies that probably would have precluded anybody from having any type of relationship with him on any level.
2 years after Michael was adopted, Bob and Kay found a new ray of hope when they adopted Annie.
Annie was cute as a button when she arrived. Everybody loved her.
Bob adored Anne. Annie became the apple of her father's eye, and suddenly Annie, the baby, became the favorite child. Everybody in the family loved her.
The more attention Bob gave Annie, the harder he was on his 2 boys. Larry seemed to be able to turn the other cheek, but not Michael.
Michael had been getting into trouble more increasingly over the last year or so.
Michael began to have problems of a fairly serious nature. Tension between he and his father, tension between he and the other family members.
By 1980, Michael's rebellious nature pushed his parents to their breaking point.
One night, Michael asked to go out, and they said no. So he sneaked out. Went out with his buddies. When he came back home at about midnight, he pounds on the door. His mother comes to the door, looks at him and says, "No, we're not letting you in." He goes over to a neighbor's house, spends a night, goes to school the next day on his own. And while he's there, his parents had called. Social services said, "We can't handle him anymore."
After 5 years of struggling with Michael, Bob and Kay were so concerned about his volatile behavior that they asked the state to place him with another family.
He never lived at home again.
It was just a very difficult situation. Bob and Kay loved him, but they felt there was nothing they could do for him.
While Bob and Kay tried to stay focused on Larry and Annie, Michael's state of mind seemed to deteriorate.
Michael had been in a reform school and he got in a fight and got in some trouble, so they sent him to a state mental hospital for evaluation. And that was just a few weeks before the murders. He was staying at this facility.
The Crownsville State Hospital Center was terrifying, faceless, institutional, decrepit buildings, straight out of a Stephen King nightmare.
Had Bob and Kay's rejection led Michael Swartz to commit a cold-blooded murder? Detective Barr and his partner decide to make the short drive to Crownsville and ask Michael for themselves.
He was interrogated by these talented homicide detectives. Michael's denying.
Michael's words say one thing, but to the detectives, his appearance tells a different story.
They did notice it. Michael had very noticeable marks on his long neck, and he clearly had an injury of some kind there. But he said they were hickeys.
Detectives keep pushing, but Michael is adamant that he was at the hospital on the night of the murders, and the hospital records back up his claims.
We learned from the staff that their logs indicated that Michael had been there all evening.
He has what appears to be an ironclad alibi. I mean, he is in a locked ward in a state mental hospital.
The police weren't so sure. A lot of people weren't so sure. It was very lax at this Crownsville State facility. It's not a prison. It's just a hospital.
Detectives aren't completely convinced of Michael's alibi, but they don't have enough to arrest him either. And soon after that interview, Michael Swartz lawyers up.
Of course, I finally got to him. I did what all defense lawyers do, which is to say, don't say a word to anybody about anything. He was never interrogated again.
Michael won't talk, and the lab has found no useful prints on the handle of the splitting maul. But detectives know one key piece of evidence from the crime scene that could tell them everything they need to know.
During the investigation, there was a bloody palm print recovered from the sliding glass door. We had examined both victims. Neither one had blood on the palms.
If detectives can prove Michael Swartz left that print, they'll have their murderer. But that's easier said than done.
This evidence was difficult to analyze. We were very limited in 1984 with what we could do. This would involve the evidence being sent to the FBI laboratory in Washington.
Detectives investigating the savage double murder of Bob and Kay Swartz are hoping one of their most promising pieces of evidence will help them catch the killer.
A bloody palm print was lifted and sent to the FBI laboratory for analysis. We knew that it would probably take a long time to get those results.
While the feds in Washington do their careful work, the shocking news of the murder spreads.
There was a tremendous uproar in the community about this murder. A couple were murdered in their own home. A crazed killer chasing a woman through the neighborhood. There was a lot of pressure to solve the case.
That pressure only mounts when detectives receive the coroner's report. It's a grim account of a seemingly psychotic attack.
The wounds to Mr. Swartz numbered 17 in total, and in fact were lethal. Both his right and left carotid were severed during the attack.
On Kay Swartz, the autopsy showed that she was stabbed 7 times around her neck area, but they were very light wounds, tentative, and then her skull was split with a maul.
Detectives still haven't been able to locate the knife used in the attack, but the coroner's report does appear to confirm that they're on the right track.
According to the medical examiner, we had the right theory about how this may have occurred. Kay was stabbed in the basement, got up to flee. The killer would have chased Kay Schwartz as she ran from the neighborhood and into the woods, then back to the house where she was killed.
Is it possible Michael Schwartz eluded security at the Crownsville Mental Hospital and committed this crime? If so, detectives need to understand why.
I think it's fair to say there was tension in the house. Bob had a bit of a shorter fuse than Kay and had a little bit less willingness to be tolerant of some of the children's shortcomings.
Neighbors tell detectives a story they remember from a few years before, when Michael was still living with the Schwartzes.
Michael got in trouble for some sin, fighting on a school bus, something like that. And his father decided physical labor was what he needed. So he gave him this heavy wood splitting maul and said, take this stump out of the front yard, the dead tree stump. It was massive, a massive thing. There was no way Michael could get it. But he just swung it again and again and again.
Neighbors told us that Michael chopped at that tree every evening for up to 3 hours. And approaching a month later, the stump was still there. This boy had blisters on his hands.
Michael was seething and getting more and more angry. Everybody said Michael had threatened to kill his parents.
Could the maul that was used to teach Michael Schwartz a lesson have been the same one that ended Kay's life?
Michael told his mother, Kay, that I could walk up to Bob and stick a knife in his back, kill him, and no results would befall me because I'm a juvenile. The logical assumption on all of our parts was Michael had made good on his threat. He had said he would do it, and now he's done it.
4 days after they were found brutally murdered, Bob and Kay are laid to rest.
The funeral, I had replays of having moments with them. I always admired them. Like, why would somebody kill them?
The couple's obedient children, Larry and Annie Schwartz, have been staying with friends of the family, while their brother still resides at Crownsville.
Michael Schwartz was allowed out of the hospital to come to the funeral, and at the cemetery, both boys stood over the grave and shook holy water, one into Kay's grave, the other into Bob's grave. Off to one side, the two detectives on the case stood in their suits with their sunglasses in the cemetery.
Everyone gathered around, gave them their support. But most people believed it was Michael who had done it.
Many note the suspicious red marks still visible on Michael's neck. Talk spreads through the community.
The newspapers were saying that Michael was a suspect. But even though he was in Crownsville at the time, there was some question about the accountability there, and maybe he could have gotten away and done it.
With lingering concerns over Michael's alibi and the security at Crownsville, detectives decide there's only one way to find the truth once and for all.
Wanting to make sure that we had crossed every T and dotted every I, my partner and I decided that we were going to follow up and visit that mental hospital again. We wanted to make sure that it was impossible that Michael would never have been able to leave undetected. So we asked the staff to lock us in the ward where Michael was committed. If Michael could have gotten out of that, there was a chance Michael had done it.
Detectives are about to put Michael Schwartz's alibi to the test by locking themselves in the room where he stayed at the Crownsville Mental Hospital.
If he had killed his parents, Michael would have had to leave undetected, return, and get back in without someone discovering that. And we went through every door and every window. and there was no possible way we could have gotten out of that without help. So it was very convincing to us that Michael was not at the scene of the murder. Michael's been eliminated as a suspect.
It's good news for Michael, but a setback for detectives. The young man was their strongest lead. Undaunted, investigators reach out to the public, hoping to cast a much wider net.
As we conducted our investigation, we methodically went through a list of possible persons that may have intended harm to the Schwartzes. We started a hotline for people to call in tips, and we got phone calls from various neighbors and acquaintances.
One of the many calls that come in immediately piques the detectives' interest.
Persons we interviewed told us that Bob steadfastly picketed an abortion clinic in Annapolis for 4 years, never missed a Saturday. And he would approach women entering the abortion clinic and attempt to change their mind about what they were going to do.
He would intensely try to dissuade women from coming into the clinic. He would get up in their faces.
Detectives confirm that a few of those women filed police reports against Bob, so they begin interviewing every complainant and witness connected with those reports.
The police were called on several occasions by the clinic. Bob was never arrested, but he caused the abortion clinic a lot of grief.
Could the killer be someone Bob confronted, or someone with a grudge against Kay?
Kay was a school teacher at Broadneck High School.
In her classroom, she was known for laissez-faire, not a strict disciplinarian.
According to witnesses, Kay was well-liked in school. She was an easygoing teacher.
Detectives pursue every credible tip that comes in.
Our investigation revealed that there was no evidence that anyone would have a vendetta against her. In fact, there was no motive that we could establish where anyone would have been that angry or vengeful to want to kill either of them.
"8 days after the brutal double murder, investigators have hit a wall. With no fingerprints on the splitting mall and their single most promising piece of evidence still under analysis, detectives are all out of options. Undaunted, they decide to start fresh, poring over every piece of evidence they do have, starting at the very beginning.
Arundel County Police. The police have something come to my house. Okay, what is the problem, sir? My parents are dead. You think your parents are dead? Yes.
This time, investigators hone in on something they didn't notice before.
When I listened to the 911 call, Larry Schwartz said, "My parents are dead."
My parents are dead.
However, he told the first police officer on the scene that he hadn't gone downstairs. His father was in the basement. At that point, he was only known that his mother was dead, not his father. So there's an inconsistency there. It didn't make sense.
The discovery leads Detective Barr to take a harder look at Larry's version of events, and he finds several contradictions.
For example, Larry telling us that he saw his mother's body from the window. Yet I looked out the dining room window and couldn't see her body. I thought perhaps he was confused and meant to say the kitchen window, which turned out to be even worse. I climbed on the kitchen counter and looked out the window and still couldn't see her body.
Detective Barr had chalked it up to the extreme shock the boy had suffered that morning.
Larry's demeanor wasn't unusual at the time. Various people react differently under stress. He could have very well been in shock, repressing his feelings. I didn't know.
Barr wants to give Larry a chance to clear up his story, but that isn't going to happen.
Larry had gotten an attorney. The attorney had advised him not to talk to us.
At last, word comes in from the FBI. Test results on their key piece of evidence from the crime scene. The bloody palm print on the sliding glass door, the one detectives believe was made by the killer.
It came back. Finally, we could find out who it could possibly belong to, what we were dealing with.
Coming up, it's a twist that no one saw coming.
A chill just went up my spine. It just didn't seem right.
Detectives working to catch Bob and Kay Schwartz's killer finally had the results of their key piece of crime scene evidence from the FBI's forensic lab in Washington, D.C.
I was notified by the FBI laboratory that they had positively identified the bloody palm print recovered from the sliding glass door.
The results confirm what detectives believed months earlier. The palm print belongs to one of Bob and Kay's own children, but not the child they suspected.
It came back belonging to Larry Schwartz. At that point, the state's attorney for Anne Arundel County authorized an arrest warrant be obtained for Larry Schwartz.
Authorities charged young Schwartz as an adult with 2 counts of first-degree murder.
When the news gets out, it causes an uproar in Cape St. Clair. Michael Schwartz was known as the bad kid in the family, not handsome, likable Larry.
A chill just went up my spine. It just didn't seem right. I didn't have a single suspicion.
It was very difficult to accept that Larry had that type of violence within him.
Larry was seen as this model, mild-mannered son. Nobody in a million years would have expected him to commit one of the most heinous crimes in the history of Annapolis.
The community was in denial. The majority of them were convinced that Michael Schwartz had done this. There was certainly a lot of speculation about whether we had the right person or not.
It was very hard for people to believe that he could have done it. I think that they just felt there was more to this. There was more going on than any of us could understand.
Why would a docile youth, beloved by everybody, explode in a rage and stab both his parents? Why? Everybody wanted to know the answer.
Authorities want answers too. But Larry, at the direction of the defense team hired by concerned family friends, is not talking and has neither admitted nor denied guilt. So for the next 15 months, while Larry waits it out in jail, detectives spend every waking moment trying to build an airtight case.
We lacked a confession. The state's attorney for Anne Arundel County had me reassigned to his office to work exclusively on this case. We had to make sure that we had every piece of evidence we could get to close this case.
Without Larry's confession, detectives need to find out what led this soft-spoken boy to such violent extremes.
I continued to interview people, collect statements.
Investigators soon realized that Michael wasn't the only son who had a hard time at home.
I believe that Larry was under tremendous pressure. He was repeatedly chastised for the poor grades. He was restricted from leaving the yard.
I think it was more of a protection thing. You're trying to keep him away from the wrong crowd, and I think Larry could have been pulled in many ways. I think they were afraid of that.
I believe personally that he was angry. He was frustrated. It was cumulative, that he was holding rage inside him, and whatever may have happened that night set him off.
But some speculated that there was another reason why Larry turned on his parents.
Michael kept contact with Larry. He changed Larry's view of the family, and in a negative way. He was telling him that they just got rid of me, they want nothing to do with me, you know. Larry, he didn't want to be left like that. He didn't want to go into foster home again.
Larry was extremely worried that what happened to Michael would happen to him.
Then it changed, where he was afraid he was going to be put out.
Despite what may have led to this violent act, 17-year-old Larry Swartz is about to be tried for first-degree murder.
15 months after the crimes, the prosecutor had witnesses ready to line up, psychiatric witnesses who said Larry was sane, and he knew what he was doing, and he actually planned it. And they had a case to present that showed premeditated, cold-blooded murder.
Larry Swartz looked unconcerned as he arrived this morning from the county jail where he had spent the last 15 months.
More than 60 witnesses have been subpoenaed to testify at Larry Swartz's trial, which is expected to last 2 weeks.
I was at the courthouse expecting a trial. There was no trial. Nobody expected anything like this to happen. It was shocking.
After detectives and prosecutors have labored more than a year preparing their case against Larry Swartz for the murder of his parents, a last-minute maneuver by Swartz's legal team has brought everything to an unexpected, screeching halt. The trial is called off.
Larry had confessed to his attorneys.
He broke down. He broke down sobbing and heaving, and he said he did it, he was guilty, and he just killed them.
Finally, authorities have their confession, leaving behind any doubt of Larry's guilt.
Ultimately, the expected killer hadn't done it. The unexpected killer had done it.
Now, the state's attorney's office has to decide what punishment could possibly fit this crime.
The state agreed to a plea of second-degree murder.
The prosecutor recommended a 20-year sentence with all but 12 suspended. The judge agreed to make it concurrent as opposed to consecutive. I've never seen a case that lenient.
The state's attorney wanted me to take Larry to the confinement facility. He knew that if I took Larry, there was a potential for Larry to tell me why he did this and how did it really occur. And I sat down with him and asked him to tell us, Larry, why did you do it? He didn't answer me. And I pressed him again, and he said, I just lost it. He said that he had come home from school that day, and later in the evening, his mother had asked him how he had done on his tests. And he knew that he had failed Spanish, and she had been writing him about not doing well in school. And she made a caustic remark about his grades, having you probably failed them, meaning the tests. So he took a knife and he stabbed her repeatedly about the neck. And then Bob was alerted to the activity, the noise, and he attacked Bob. Larry never did explain or admit to chasing Kay through the neighborhood. I found out during the autopsy that she had been stabbed through her esophagus, so perhaps she couldn't scream. With sheer terror, running for her life, Larry did admit to putting the splitting maul into his mother's head.
After committing such a violent act, Larry knew there was only one way to cast off suspicion.
Armando County Police.
We came to the realization that throughout the interview with Larry, he was trying to steer our investigation. He force-fed us information about Michael.
The whole time that his brother Michael was a suspect in the killings, Larry played the victim card.
When we were here for the funeral, Larry wanted to hang out with us, essentially, which we were perfectly prepared to do. not believing for a minute that he was involved. We viewed him as a victim, a kid who didn't have any parents at this point in time. It's, to this day, hard to fathom.
Though Larry's adoptive brother, Michael, had been exonerated, he nonetheless met with a tragic end.
When it turned out that he didn't commit the murders, he had nowhere to go. His parents are dead. His brother's in prison. His sister's been adopted by another family, and he has no one in the world. He starts doing drugs, and while he's taking drugs, he and his buddies go rob a man, and in the course of robbing the man, they stabbed him to death. Michael is sentenced to prison for life. None of the leniency his brother got. Life. He's now in his 50s, still in prison in the state of Maryland, 35 years later.
This just had to be one of the worst lose-lose, destructive situations that, society can see happen.
Looking back over this case, I have empathy for both Michael and Larry. I know that they struggled, yet the parents still tried to do the right thing.
Kay and Bob had adopted children who had been through a lot of bad times. And so I think they were trying to heal the wounds that they came to the family with.
For both Michael and Larry, I could understand the frustration, the anger, but I couldn't understand the murder. That's the part I didn't understand.
For more information on an unexpected killer, go to Oxygen.com. A loving and outgoing mother of 3.
Everybody wanted to be around her and her energy and her beauty.
She was an incredible human being and a great mother.
Is found murdered in a farmer's field.
There was numerous blunt force trauma injuries.
Cuts, lacerations, bruising throughout her body.
This poor woman was brutally attacked and murdered.
As detectives hunt the killer, they unearth dark secrets.
All the information kept leading us to think that he was trying to find a way out of this relationship.
He would throw stuff, break stuff. He was really controlling. He was really manipulative.
They had an argument, something happened, it went too far.
Then, new revelations turn the case on its head.
In the video, there is a male party following her into the darkness.
I had absolutely nothing to do with. What did you have nothing to do with?
And points to a predator no one saw coming.
It was definitely a very big twist.
When the news came out, he made me sick. When I saw him, he looked like a monster.
Green Bay, Wisconsin is a relatively small, close-knit community where a lot of people know each other. Obviously, our claim to fame is having the Green Bay Packers in town here. So during football season, pretty much everything centers around that.
It's 100% a place that you would want to raise a family.
The crime rate in the Green Bay area is generally very low, especially when it comes to violent crime.
On a warm May afternoon in 2016, nearby Brown County Sheriff's Office gets a troubling 911 call from a local farmer.
Brown County 911, what's your emergency?
Oh, God. We just found a human body.
Is it a male or a female?
It's got long hair, but I didn't go near it. I'm about at the top of a hill just looking down on it.
The 911 call was from farmers working in a field, and they located a body.
Investigators race to the farmer's field on the outskirts of Green Bay.
The body was behind a brushy, woody area, not visible by the road itself.
It was laying face down with arms spread across the front of her head and feet towards the road. The victim was a blonde female, approximately in her 30s. Past that, we really didn't have any identifying information other than the pink wristband on her wrist. There was a distinct pattern that we found on the victim's back, which appeared to be from the sole of the shoe.
It wasn't until the body was turned that all the injuries were located.
The extent of injuries that she suffered were pretty horrific. There was trauma to her neck that would indicate possible strangulation, in addition to lacerations, bruising throughout her body. Her fingernails were damaged, indicative of defensive wounds. That tells us that she was fighting for her life.
There were nail clippings taken for the potential of any DNA from the suspect underneath her fingernails.
We were looking for anything that could be used as a weapon. However, the search of the area didn't reveal anything.
After questioning the farmer and clearing him of any suspicion, investigators try to determine how the victim ended up in his field.
The area was searched thoroughly for any clothing that may have been left behind, any other tracks, footprints.
There were a set of tire tracks that went from the driveway to where the victim's body was found and then circled back towards the driveway. The farmers work in the field were using a skidster and a four-wheeler, and they definitely didn't match those pieces of equipment.
We definitely felt like this was likely the suspect vehicle that was used to transport the body there.
As detectives continue to process the crime scene, the local sheriff's office receives another call.
Brown County Public Safety, this is Therese.
How do I go about, this missing person?
Okay, and who's missing?
My girlfriend.
What's her name?
Nicole Vanderheiden.
Our dispatch center received a phone call from a party named Doug Dietrich reporting that he did not know where his girlfriend was, and the last he had seen or heard from her was the night before.
We felt very strongly that the missing person report was going to involve the victim we had in the field.
Officers from the crime scene are dispatched to interview the caller, 34-year-old Doug Dietrich, who lived with his girlfriend, Nicole Vanderheiden.
Is Doug here?
Hello.
Hi. I'm here for a missing persons report.
As allowed by Wisconsin law, officers secretly film the conversation.
It was important to record the interview with Doug. Based on the victim in the field, it's always in the back of our mind that this could be some kind of domestic violence issue that happened.
Doug looked completely hungover. He had really dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. I asked him why he's making this missing persons report.
Nobody's seen or heard from her since last night, but I'd say midnight, yeah.
Okay.
Doug indicated that he and Nikki joined a group of friends out at a local establishment to participate in watching a live band.
Doug provides a telling detail when asked what Nikki was wearing.
She would have had a bracelet on.
Okay.
It was a pink bracelet for the 21 verification.
There was a wristband that the victim was wearing. So based on that information, we were quite certain that it was Nikki that we were with in the field.
As police work to confirm that the victim in the field is 31-year-old mother of three, Nicole Vanderheiden, they learn more about her background.
Nikki was born in Manitowoc, Wisconsin. Then she went to high school here. She was the most amazing, inspiring, beautiful, happy woman I have ever met in my life. She always enjoyed being around family.
After high school, Nikki attended the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay, graduating in 2010.
Nikki's background included a double major in science and education. From that, she was a substitute school teacher.
Nikki was one of the hardest workers I've known. She always had two jobs as a substitute teacher and waitressing.
Outside of work, Nikki was dedicated to fitness.
She definitely took care of herself, and she worked out a lot. Everybody wanted to be around her and her energy and her beauty. We always complimented how beautiful she was, and she was inside and out.
In 2005, Nikki got married and had 2 children, but the marriage ended in 2012.
Nikki was definitely a hands-on mom. I think it made her proud to be able to do that, because being a single mother is not easy.
Then, in 2015, Nikki met Doug Dietrich.
Nikki and Doug had a spark. They moved very quickly and got pregnant, and she was so excited to become a mother of 3 beautiful children. Nikki and Doug were still learning to live with one another. It was definitely a life changer.
As Nikki's boyfriend, Doug is a leading suspect in her murder. He is brought to the sheriff's office for a formal interview and informed that the body police have found is most likely Nikki.
This body that was found down the street, there's a lot of similarities.
Doug was crying, emotional, in a state of shock.
With Nikki identified as the victim, detectives asked Doug to recount the events leading up to the last time he saw her alive.
Doug reported that they had been out at a concert at the Watering Hole, which is a bar in a suburb of Green Bay.
As the night progressed, they had been consuming alcohol, and Doug had ran into some friends from high school that he had not seen in a while. And he confirmed that Nikki was mad because she saw Doug talking to another female at the Watering Hole, and this basically set her off.
From there, they got separated. He stayed at the Watering Hole with his friend Greg, and Nikki went with their friend group to the Sardine Can, which is downtown Green Bay.
Doug had last actually seen Nikki around 11:30 when she departed from the Watering Hole to the Sardine Can.
At some point, Nikki did get a hold of Doug on the phone.
What did she say?
Who are you talking to? She was hysterical and drunk and irrational, not making any sense.
Detectives ask if they can search Doug's phone for any texts he'd exchanged with Nikki.
Nikki was definitely angry texting Doug. She made mention of what bitch are you talking to? She was accusing him of cheating, telling him that he was abusive. It was actually a really big red flag for me.
Had Doug and Nikki's argument escalated into violence later that night?
It started to kind of click with everybody that they had an argument, something happened, it went too far, and Doug may be involved.
Coming up, detectives learn more about the night of the murder.
When we look at the video footage, you can see a male follower out of the gate.
We are trying to figure out what exactly happened a short distance away out of camera view.
She's not wanting to have anything to do with him and starts turning into an argument and becomes a little bit physical.
And uncover surprising new suspects.
I'm going to tell you that your timeline seems so abundantly rehearsed. The time, to be honest with us, is right now.
Before a stunning twist throws the case into turmoil.
The true killer came completely out of left field.
The Google dashboard data showed him at every single crime scene that we had.
I was very concerned who this could be. Who did this to our beloved Nikki?
After confirming that the body discovered in a farm field is 31-year-old mother of 3, Nikki Vanderheiden, police suspect that her violent murder may be linked to an angry exchange of texts she had with her boyfriend Doug Dietrich the night she was killed.
The text messages definitely led us to believe that if Nikki would have made it home and if she would have had contact with Doug, there would have been some sort of altercation.
When detectives pressed Doug about what happened that night, he claims that after 12:30 a.m., he and his friend Greg left the bar they'd been at to look for Nikki at another bar.
Doug describes getting the sardine can with Greg, finding that Nikki's not there, and then continuing to look around for her and being concerned.
Doug stated that he had assumed that Nikki made it home and that she would be there when he got there. So him and Greg got in their car and drove home.
With Nikki's 2 older children away for the night with their father, Doug says he got home to find the babysitter and his son, but no Nikki.
She said we haven't heard from Nikki, and I was just kind of figuring wherever she went, with friends or whatever. And that's why I went to bed. She did not come home at all last night after you. Not at all. There wasn't a blip or word from her.
He said that he woke up to give the baby a bottle at 6:30 in the morning, and Nikki wasn't there.
And it did not appear that Mr. Dietrich was all that concerned until later in the day, which drew our suspicions.
I did have concern as to why did it take until about 4:30 the next day to report her missing.
Following their interview with Doug, investigators obtain a sample of his DNA and release him.
The initial interview with Doug was basically to get him locked in so that we could corroborate everything that he was telling us through either physical evidence or through other statements from other witnesses.
As police set out to verify Doug's story, Nikki's family and friends learned that she's been murdered.
Knowing that Nikki was murdered and how horrific it was impacted our lives in a very horrible way. Who the hell would do this to someone with such an amazing, beautiful soul?
Reports of Nikki's murder spread shock through the community, and Nikki's family members share their grief on local news.
Heather Meyer and her family say it doesn't seem real.
Terrible. Absolutely terrible. She's been extremely up and down, numbing pain.
As Nikki's loved ones continue reeling from her death, an officer from the sheriff's office makes a crucial find.
An officer located some clothing on the side of the road, approximately a mile drive from where Nikki's body was located. Deputies were able to identify the clothing as Nikki's.
There was blood located at numerous areas in the clothing. The majority of the blood was in her pants area.
There was also a purse located which contained her ID. Her cell phone was also found at that same location. It was pretty apparent that it just got tossed out the window in a panic just by the suspect wanting to get rid of it.
As they submit Nikki's items to the lab for testing, detectives receive her autopsy report.
The primary injuries were the strangulation and trauma to the head.
They had discovered over 240 injuries to Nikki's body, including 30 to her head and face area. The last few minutes of Nikki's life would have been very painful.
There were injuries to her genitalia, which could be indicative of a sexual assault. The medical examiners did do a sexual assault exam, which included swabbing for evidence. The lab started finding a partial male profile, but they didn't have enough information to get an identification of it.
The crime lab advised us that we would need to continue to submit samples that the suspect would have touched. We're only allowed to send in so many exhibits at a time as the crime lab is very busy. We have hundreds of swabbings of Nikki's clothing, so I started off with areas where you would more likely see some touch DNA.
While they await answers from the crime lab, detectives get a hold of security video to learn what they can about Nikki's last hours.
When we first were able to take a look at the video footage from the sardine can, we were able to identify Nikki there with Doug's friends. Initially, she appeared to be having a good time, dancing around.
The later portion of the evening, we can see Nikki and her group of friends at an outside table, and you can see Nikki looking down at her phone. You can tell by her body movements that she is upset.
And eventually, she gets up and storms off through an entrance that they're sitting nearby.
What detectives see next catches their attention.
After Nikki leaves, you can see a male follow her out of the gate.
Police ask themselves, who was this man? And was he involved in Nikki's murder?
We knew that his information was going to be vital. That was the last time Nikki was seen before she was killed.
We wanted to know everything that he saw and heard because he's the last known person that we knew that saw her alive.
The day after Nikki Vanderheiden is found murdered in a farmer's field, investigators are trying to track down the man seen following her out of a bar just hours before she was killed.
In the video, there is a male party following after Nikki and walking off into the darkness. We are trying to figure out what exactly happened a short distance away out of camera view.
Officers are dispatched to interview patrons who were at the bar that night.
Based on the interviews with witnesses, we knew that male was Aaron Kolinsky.
This was a friend that they were with earlier in the night.
Police track Aaron down and bring him in for an interview.
Aaron advised us that throughout most of the night, Nikki was having a great time. And then at some point, he saw a mood shift in her. He basically had said that Nikki was trying to get a hold of Doug and that he wasn't responding.
Nikki ultimately became very angry, and that's when she left the sardine can on foot. Aaron describes following her and trying to convince her to come back and get a taxi or an Uber to go back home.
What Aaron says happened next raises detective suspicion.
But she's not wanting to have anything to do with him, and it starts turning into an argument and becomes a little bit physical.
At one point, Nikki fell to the ground on her own, and she started creating a bigger scene. Aaron advised us that she began kicking and punching at him as he was trying to help her up. He had tried to tell her, hey, we can get you home, you can come with us, but she refused.
Aaron noticed that there were people in the neighborhood seeing what was going on, so he decided to just leave it alone at that point.
Investigators wonder if there's more to the story than Aaron's telling them.
We are actually able to find those people, and they indeed remembered a female and male yelling or having a disagreement.
Continuing to watch the video, Aaron does return a very short time later, and based on the other statements from the friends that were with the group, we knew that Aaron didn't necessarily do anything wrong.
Aaron says he and his friends took an Uber home, never to see Nikki alive again.
There was video footage that showed Aaron and the other group leaving in an Uber, and there was no indication that they had come back to the area after they left.
With Aaron crossed off the list, police continue scouring the bar's security video for clues and find something unexpected.
We eventually saw Doug and Greg arrive there. Doug told us they're looking all over for Nikki, but the video is showing that he and Greg go to the bar and just start hanging out. It definitely isn't consistent with the sense of concern that he was initially talking about.
According to the surveillance video, Doug and Greg stayed at that sardine can until about 2:15 in the morning. And the fact that Doug said that they did all this looking while at the sardine can told us that he's not being entirely truthful with his efforts to locate her.
Detectives wonder if Doug had misled them about his concern for Nikki. Was there something he was hiding?
Just the mere fact that he didn't know where his girlfriend was and didn't appear to care all that much was a red flag.
With their suspicion growing, police reach out to Nikki's family to learn more about her relationship with Doug.
Nikki's mother and sister, they both voice concerns of Doug's behavior.
I know. It's been really, really rocky during her pregnancy and their relationship. Crazy relationship. He's always been very controlling. My dad's very, afraid her. Yeah.
Nikki's mom, as well as her sister, Heather, both say that they wouldn't be surprised if Doug was the person that was responsible for this.
Investigators search Doug's name in police records and make an alarming discovery.
checking police records. We did locate past girlfriends that accused him of being abusive. There was at least one incident that was reported to police, but was never charged.
Police contact the woman who filed a complaint against Doug and ask her for more details.
When you would argue, it would be...
He would spit in my face.
Okay.
He would, throw stuff, break stuff. He was really controlling. He was really manipulative.
So when we saw that, that was obviously very concerning to us.
He tackled me and broke my ankle.
Despite learning that Doug's ex-girlfriend had a prior assault conviction and that Doug had never been formally charged for domestic violence, investigators remain suspicious.
At this point, we had the information that showed there could be the pattern of this abusive, aggressive behavior. And we know that Doug and Nicole had a volatile relationship, which would lead us to believe that there would be some sort of confrontation that night.
Police obtain a warrant to search Doug and Nicole's home.
During the search at Doug and Nikki's house, there were several things of concern that were located. There was blood on the floor in the garage. There was blood and dirt found in Nikki's vehicle.
There was also a set of Nike Air Jordan shoes that had a herringbone pattern on them, which was similar to what was on Nikki's back. There was also some red marks on the surface, appeared to be blood on the bottom of those shoes.
While conducting the search, Doug's neighbors from across the street approached police with a startling new discovery.
While mowing their lawn, they noticed a blood spot on the curb line of their property, and also they hit a cord of some type with their lawnmower.
We did find a large quantity of what appeared to be dried blood, as well as 2 pieces of electrical phone charging cord. There was also some clumps of blonde hair.
The blood on those items and the blood found in the road were positively identified as Nikki's. It was pretty apparent to us that that's where the altercation took place. That's where she was likely killed. When that crime scene in front of the house was located, that gave us a theory of what happened, and it continued to point us towards Doug as a suspect.
After determining that Nikki Vanderheiden was likely murdered on the street in front of the home she shared with Doug Dietrich, investigators are weighing a growing body of evidence against Doug.
This evidence that we found is kind of emboldening what we had initially thought, that Nikki got home, an argument ensued between her and Doug, and this incident took place in the street, and somehow some of that evidence would have gotten transformed into the garage and then into Nikki's vehicle.
Looking at the totality of the circumstances, we decided there was probable cause to arrest Doug at that point.
Okay. Right now I'm going to be taking you into custody. We'll be handcuffing you. I'll explain all that to you in a bit. And transporting you down to the sheriff's department. Okay? Okay. Be cooperative with me. All right.
With Doug in custody, detectives work to solidify their case against him.
When we did the search of Nikki's car and found the blood and the dirt in the car, it was initially thought that that may have been the vehicle that was used to take Nikki to the field where she was located.
One of the things that we learned was that she had a progressive snapshot device in her vehicle, which is used for driving behavior, insurance rates. But we figured that this could help us show location from the night she was murdered.
Once we got those records back, it was found that her vehicle did not move the night of her murder. At that point, all kinds of questions are still out there. The big one being if Doug was involved in this, how Doug may have moved her. Did he use a different vehicle? Did he have help?
We knew that Doug's vehicle was not in play. It was at the watering hole all night, where it was verified on video.
One person whose name came up was Greg Matthew, who was actually driving Doug during their night out and dropped Doug off at home.
Greg was Doug's best friend, was with Doug that entire night. and we were focused on him maybe being an accessory.
Investigators bring Greg to the sheriff's office and ask him about the night of the murder.
Greg was very exact about timelines of phone calls and what they did that night.
12:15, got in my car, and Nikki was calling him, yelling at him, telling him she's leaving. By the time we get back to the Sardine Can, all of our friends left. At what point we left, it was probably 2:15. Got to Doug's house probably at 2:45 and went back to my house. My parents were home. They know that I was there the rest of that night.
Greg's timeline was very consistent with Doug's, which was suspicious in nature that you usually aren't going to have your times down that path.
I'm going to tell you that your timeline seems so abundantly rehearsed, so that the time to be honest with us is right now.
We pressed Greg very hard, hoping that we would find some sort of inconsistencies in his story or get him to crack and finally turn on Doug.
Honestly, I had absolutely nothing
to do with what? What did you have nothing to do with?
Anything to do with.
What did you have nothing to do with?
I would like to leave.
After becoming upset with some questions, he did leave while investigators were still sitting at the interview table talking to him.
Investigators asked Greg's parents to confirm his alibi of coming straight home from Doug's shortly after 2:45 a.m.
Greg's parents told us they were only going off of what he told them. They didn't physically see him or have any firsthand knowledge.
While detectives keep Greg on the board as a potential accomplice to Doug, they receive DNA test results from the crime scene.
There was little to no sign of Doug's DNA anywhere on Nicole's body or clothing.
Doug's DNA profile is not matching up with an unknown male DNA profile that we're finding on those items.
Test results on other evidence bring even more disappointing news for investigators.
It turns out the blood on the floor of the garage was likely from a turkey that Doug had killed while hunting. The blood in Nikki's car was from one of her other children, and it was not Nikki's.
What we thought was blood on the bottom of the shoe tested inconclusive for blood.
So all those things that we thought we believed to be Nikki's blood turned out not to be. We also got location data from Doug and Greg's cell phones that corroborated their account of where they were that night, down to the times they left the bar, the route they took home, then when they got back to Doug's house, and from there.
With no concrete evidence linking Doug to Nikki's murder, authorities release him from jail.
Doug's DNA isn't really showing up where we thought it was going to be, and there's still this unknown male profile that really threw a curve at us.
Police believe that Nikki was murdered in front of her own home. But if Doug hadn't killed her, who had?
I was very concerned who this could be, who this monster could have been that did this to our beloved Nikki.
Two days after finding Nikki Vanderheiden savagely murdered, detectives hunting her killer arrested her boyfriend, Doug Dietrich. But when DNA evidence exonerates Doug, detectives turn their focus to one urgent question.
The biggest question we had to answer outside of who did this was, how did she get home? We spent countless hours watching video surveillance of every single known business between Nikki's residence and the Sardine Can. We had investigators watching highway camera footage, bridge camera footage to see if we could catch either her walking or crossing the river to get to that side of town.
We were running out of leads. It was frustrating at times.
Still hoping for a DNA match to the killer, investigators continue sending the crime lab samples of Nikki's clothing found at the side of the road.
We picked 10 items at a time for testing. We're looking for any items that we believe might contain more of this unknown male's DNA, hoping for a full profile. After sending several batches and not coming up with anything definitive, we end up sending a batch that included the socks that Nikki was wearing still when her body was found.
The crime lab were able to get enough of a profile off of that sock to be able to enter it into the CODIS system.
The suspect somehow got some touch DNA on those socks.
Entered into the National DNA Database, the profile returns a hit that takes investigators by surprise.
The DNA hit that we received was that of George Stephen Birch, who was from the state of Virginia.
As far as we knew, he had no relation to anybody that was with Nikki that night or Nikki herself. All the information we had was leading us towards Doug. So once we got that DNA information, it was very surprising.
George Birch was in and out of prison on the East Coast, and at some point earlier in 2016 had moved to the Green Bay area.
So we start digging through the Green Bay Police Department records, see what we can find out about him.
George Stephen Birch was contacted by the Green Bay Police Department a few weeks after the homicide for a hit-and-run car accident. The vehicle was a Chevy S10 Blazer that was found a short distance away from where Mr. Birch was staying.
At the time, he was questioned about it and claimed that the vehicle must have been stolen.
Suspicious about the nature and timing of the supposed theft, investigators see if his Chevy Blazer could have been used to dump Nikki's body.
We ended up comparing the specs of a Chevy Blazer and the width of the tire tracks that we found in the field, and we found it to be a very near match.
Digging deeper, detectives find even more evidence connecting George to Nikki's last known movements.
We knew that he hung out at a bar that was down in that same general area of the sardine can.
We were able to identify Birch's Google account and track the location of the cell phone that Google account is associated with.
The Google dashboard data showed us roadmap of Mr. Birch's whereabouts that night, and he was found at every single crime scene that we had, including the farm field, Nicole and Doug's residence, the roadway where Nicole's property was found, and then back at his residence.
When we got that information, we knew we had our guy at that point.
Police track down George Birch and bring him into the sheriff's office.
When we had our contact with Mr. Birch, it was obvious that this wasn't his first contact with law enforcement. He's very cool, very calm.
The reason you're here is in reference to a homicide investigation into Nicole Vanderheiden. Okay? So, is this something that you want to talk to me about?
Sir?
What's that?
For a lawyer.
Okay.
Birch didn't provide any details or provide his version of events of anything. We still didn't necessarily have the details on how they met, why they were together.
But with DNA and other evidence firmly implicating him, police charged George Birch with Nikki's murder.
When the suspect was arrested, it was a result of actual physical evidence, and I felt so much relief that the family would never have doubt as to who did this to Nikki.
When the news came out about who did this, he made me sick when I saw him. He looked like a monster.
On February 19th, 2018, George Birch goes on trial for the murder of Nikki Vanderheiden. But when he finally takes the stand, what he says leaves the courtroom stunned.
At trial, Mr. Birch's explanation for what happened was he met Nikki at the bar. They were getting along, flirting, having a good time, and he ended up bringing her back to her house where she resides with Mr. Dietrich.
George said they were having sex in front of Nikki's house in his vehicle, and at some point someone comes out, hits him over the head with a pistol and knocks him unconscious.
The next thing that I remember was literally waking up on the ground outside the truck.
He wakes up and finds Nikki already dead on the ground and someone holding him at gunpoint.
At that point, did you know who that individual was?
Never seen him before in my life.
Do you know who that individual is now?
Now I do.
Who was it?
It was that Dietrich.
Investigators believe that 31-year-old Nikki Vanderheiden was brutally murdered by convicted felon George Birch. But at trial, George blindsides everyone by claiming that Doug Dietrich was the one responsible for Nikki's death.
Mr. Birch in the courtroom was very arrogant, very pompous. His demeanor was that of, I'm innocent and Doug did this.
Mr. Birch advised us that Doug ordered George to drive the body to the farm field. George said that Doug had ordered him to carry Nikki's body into the field and drop it. George then said that at one point he was able to get into a struggle with Doug, push him away, and get back into the car and take off.
He didn't come up with that story until he had a chance to look at all the evidence that was being filed against him.
George's wild allegation forces detectives to dig deeper to prove his guilt.
Part of the obstacles in this was disproving that Doug did it and show his movements from that morning and that night.
During the investigation, we learned that Nikki had given Doug a Fitbit device as a gift. So we realized that Doug was wearing that Fitbit device during all our contact with him. So we're able to review the information on the Fitbit device when he was home, going to sleep, and waking up again.
Based upon all the Google dashboard data that we had from George, we knew at what time he and Nikki arrived back to Doug and Nicole's residence. So we were able to look at Doug's Fitbit to show that at that time that George and Nicole were outside, Doug was sleeping and not, in fact, out murdering his girlfriend and disposing of the body.
Back in court, prosecutors used the location tracking evidence to demolish George's story.
The act of violence that Doug allegedly did to him did not add up with any of the other evidence that we had.
None of us bought George's story in court. We all knew it was a joke and a fairy tale made up. I think Nikki just wanted to get home to her children, and I know she fought for her life that night.
Now prosecutors put forth their theory of what really happened that night.
What I believe happened is that there was some arguments between Doug and Nikki.
I believe that Nikki did leave the sardine can pretty upset and ended up at Richard Cranium's bar, about a half a mile away.
She was intoxicated. She was by herself. She was emotional. She is very outgoing, personable person. So she'd be very easy for someone to prey upon.
At some point, she meets George Birch. They get to talking. He offers Nikki a ride home. She accepts it. They end up in front of her house. I believe at that point, George thought he was going to get some action for taking a girl home and didn't expect her to start fighting.
And that enraged Mr. Birch.
It turns into a sexual assault. At some point, he strangles her with that phone cord that was found.
She fell out of the vehicle. He continued to stomp on her back and her head, eventually killing her. And then loading her up in his vehicle, driving her to a field and disposing of her body, and then going home like nothing happened.
This poor woman was absolutely brutally attacked and murdered in front of her own home where her baby lay sleeping, and the thought of what he did to her is beyond comprehension.
After closing arguments, it didn't take very long at all for them to make a decision.
The verdict reads as follows. We, the jury, find the defendant, George Stephen Birch, guilty of first-degree intentional homicide
For murdering Nikki Vanderheiden, George Birch is sentenced to life in prison without parole.
The true killer in this homicide came completely out of left field. I felt extreme relief for the family that someone was going to answer for this extremely heinous, horrific crime.
He's going to prison for the rest of his life. That was music to our ears. But we still knew it wasn't going to bring our Nikki back.
Nikki had 3 young children at home, one of which is a newborn. She had her entire life ahead of her and a lot of things to accomplish and a lot of friends and family that miss her.
She was an incredible human being.
घड़े उत्ते जा बैठा आया सी मेहमान जना डोला अखियां वेला बैठा आया सी मेहमान जना आया सी मेहमान जना डोला अखियां वेला बैठा